all began on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning, but turned out to be the day my life unraveled in ways I could never have imagined. As I walked into the hospital, I felt fine, perfectly sober and ready for a long day of surgeries. But something was off. The moment I entered the operating room, whispers rippled through the air. "Is that alcohol?" one nurse muttered under her breath. My heart sank as I realized they were talking about me. Before I could defend myself, disaster struck during a critical procedure, a delicate brain surgery that demanded absolute precision. My hands trembled slightly, just enough to make the surgical instruments clink unnervingly against each other. Panic erupted around me when I almost nicked a major blood vessel. The patient's family, already anxious, demanded another surgeon immediately, their voices sharp with fear and accusation. By noon, rumors had spread like wildfire throughout the hospital. Colleagues who once respected me now looked at me with disgust, as if I were some kind of monster. Whispers echoed in every hallway. "Dr. Five is drunk on the job." Even my closest peers avoided eye contact, unwilling to associate themselves with the scandal brewing around me. The pressure mounted when the board called an emergency meeting. They didn't even give me a chance to explain. Instead, they bombarded me with accusations, threatening not only suspension but also public exposure. "This isn't just about you," Dr. Gibson barked, his voice cold and unyielding. "The hospital's reputation is at stake here." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. How could this be happening? I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in years, yet everything and everyone was conspiring against me. As the hours dragged on, paranoia crept in. Every step I took down those sterile corridors felt heavier than the last. Nurses whispered behind clipboards, patients refused my care, and security guards followed me like shadows, waiting for me to slip up again. The weight of their judgment crushed me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my career, the very essence of who I was slipping through my fingers. That evening, as I sat alone in my office, staring at the flickering fluorescent lights above, I realized this wasn't just a personal crisis anymore. It was a ticking time bomb threatening to destroy everything I'd worked so hard to build. The tension reached its breaking point when I was summoned to the boardroom for what felt like a tribunal rather than a meeting. Dr. Gibson sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable, but his posture radiating authority. The air in the room was thick with hostility as other senior staff members glared at me, their expressions oscillating between pity and disdain. "Dr. Five," Gibson began, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "You've brought shame to this institution." His words stung, not because they were true, but because he refused to listen to reason. Before I could defend myself, he slammed a folder onto the table. Photographs of me allegedly reeking of alcohol during surgeries. Testimonies from colleagues who claimed I was unfit to practice medicine. It was an ambush, meticulously planned to paint me as the villain. But then something shifted. As I scanned the documents, my eyes caught sight of something peculiar. A medical report tucked inside the folder, marked confidential. My blood ran cold when I realized it wasn't mine. It belonged to Dr. Gibson. He had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer, yet no one knew. Not even his daughter. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. Here was a man clinging desperately to control, terrified that his own mortality would overshadow his legacy. But sympathy quickly turned to suspicion. Why was he so determined to scapegoat me? Was it truly about protecting the hospital's reputation? Or was it about diverting attention from his deteriorating health? You're hiding something, I said suddenly, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. All eyes turned toward me, some curious, others accusatory. Gibson froze mid-sentence, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. What did you say? He asked, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a screech that echoed through the tense room. I said, you're hiding something. You want to fire me because it's easier than admitting your own failures. Your secrets are eating away at you, just like this hospital is rotting from within. For a split second, there was silence. Then chaos erupted. One of the board members shouted, "How dare you accuse Dr. Gibson?" Another demanded I sit down immediately. But I didn't budge. Instead, I locked eyes with Gibson, daring him to deny it. His face flushed red, veins bulging on his temples. You have no idea what you're talking about, he spat, though his voice wavered slightly. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. As the argument escalated, Molly, a young nurse who had always believed in me, burst into the room unannounced. She held up a USB drive triumphantly. If you fire Dr. Five without investigating further, I'll release everything on this drive to the press, she declared, her voice trembling but resolute. It contains evidence proving Dr. Five isn't drinking. He has a rare condition called auto-brewery syndrome. And if that's not enough, I'll expose every dirty secret this hospital has buried over the years. The room fell silent once again, the weight of her threat hanging heavy in the air. Gibson's composure finally cracked. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table as if trying to steady himself. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and for the first time he looked frail, not the towering figure of authority we'd all feared. Do you really think threatening me will solve anything? He whispered hoarsely. But the fight had drained out of him. We all knew the truth now. The hospital's reputation wasn't the only thing at stake. It was his life, and possibly mine. The days that followed felt like an eternity as I oscillated between hope and despair, waiting for answers that seemed impossible to find. After countless blood tests, urine samples, and even a lumbar puncture, a procedure so painful it left me gritting my teeth in agony, we finally stumbled upon something extraordinary. Sitting in the dimly lit lab with Molly by my side, Dr. Gibson revealed the shocking truth. I didn't have a drinking problem. I had auto-brewery syndrome. The words hit me like a thunderclap. My gut was essentially fermenting carbohydrates into ethanol, making me intoxicated without ever taking a sip of alcohol. It was both a relief and a nightmare wrapped into one surreal revelation. But discovering the diagnosis wasn't enough to clear my name. The hospital board remained skeptical, their faces etched with doubt during our emergency meeting. This is unprecedented, one member scoffed, slamming his fist on the table. How can we trust this condition when no one has heard of it? Their skepticism stung more than any accusation because they refused to see the truth staring them in the face. Despite the mounting evidence, charts showing spikes in my blood ethanol levels after meals, expert testimonies from specialists who confirmed the rarity but legitimacy of my condition, the shadow of suspicion lingered over me like a storm cloud. Even though I now knew why I smelled of alcohol, why my hands trembled during surgeries, and why I couldn't remember certain events, the threat of losing everything still loomed large. Molly became my fiercest advocate, poring over medical journals late at night and presenting her findings to anyone willing to listen. She stood beside me in every heated argument, her voice unwavering despite the hostility aimed at us. You're punishing him for something he can't control, she shouted during one particularly tense session. Would you fire someone with diabetes for having high blood sugar? Or accuse a cancer patient of faking symptoms? Her words hung heavy in the air, forcing some members to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Yet not everyone was convinced. Dr. Gibson, though visibly shaken by his own secrets being exposed, continued to push for my dismissal. "We can't risk another scandal," he argued, his voice tinged with desperation. "The hospital's reputation is fragile enough as it is." Every day felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between defending myself and fighting back tears of frustration. Friends turned away, colleagues whispered behind closed doors, and patients avoided me like I carried a contagious disease. But through it all, Molly reminded me of what truly mattered. "You're innocent," she said firmly one evening, her eyes blazing with determination. "And innocence deserves justice." Those words fueled my resolve. Words fuel. I began documenting every detail of my treatment, every test result, every doctor's note, building a case to prove my innocence. I wouldn't let fear or prejudice dictate my future. Finally, after weeks of relentless struggle, there was a breakthrough. A renowned gastroenterologist reviewed my case and validated the diagnosis publicly, calling it a medical marvel. Still, acceptance came slowly. While some began to soften their stance, others clung stubbornly to their biases. Yet I held on to hope. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim my life. The decision to leave everything behind and head to Africa wasn't made lightly. It came after sleepless nights, endless soul-searching, and a profound reckoning with who I had become. The scandal had stripped me of my identity as a doctor, leaving me raw and vulnerable. For weeks, I wrestled with the weight of betrayal, not just from others, but also from my own body, which had turned against me in ways I couldn't control. Yet, amidst the chaos, something shifted inside me. Sitting alone one evening, staring at the city lights through my window, I realized that life is fleeting, fragile even. If I wanted to reclaim any semblance of purpose, I needed to start over somewhere far removed from the judgmental eyes of those who once knew me. When I announced my plans during a quiet dinner with Molly and a few trusted colleagues, the room fell silent. "You're really leaving?" Molly asked, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. I nodded, unable to speak for fear my emotions would betray me. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you for being more than just a mentor. You've been family." Those words nearly broke me. One by one, they each said their goodbyes, some offering heartfelt words, others simply embracing me in silence. Even Dr. Gibson showed up unexpectedly at the airport, his usual stoic demeanor softened by what looked like genuine regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, extending his hand. His apology felt hollow compared to the pain he'd caused, yet there was sincerity in his gaze. As we shook hands, he added, "Take care of yourself out there. You're stronger than most people realize, including yourself." Before I could respond, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter detailing his pancreatic cancer diagnosis, a confession meant for his daughter but given to me instead. "Tell her when the time is right," he murmured before walking away, his frail figure disappearing into the crowd. That moment haunted me throughout the flight. Here was a man clinging to pride until his final days, too afraid to confront the truth with his own flesh and blood. Africa greeted me with its harsh beauty, endless savannas bathed in golden sunlight, juxtaposed against the grim realities of poverty and disease. My first week was overwhelming. The clinic where I volunteered lacked basic supplies. Electricity flickered on and off, and clean water was scarce. Patients arrived daily, many suffering from preventable illnesses exacerbated by neglect. Their resilience humbled me, yet the enormity of the task ahead loomed large. Nights were spent under mosquito nets, listening to the distant roar of lions while reflecting on how much I had taken for granted back home. Each day tested my resolve, forcing me to adapt or risk failure. But despite the challenges, I found peace in knowing that every small victory mattered. A child saved from malaria, a mother treated for pneumonia, each act of healing reigniting my faith in humanity. And then there were moments when doubt crept in. Was I running away? Had I abandoned the fight for justice back home? These questions gnawed at me, especially during long, lonely nights under unfamiliar skies. Yet whenever despair threatened to consume me, I remembered Molly's unwavering belief in me and Dr. Gibson's unspoken plea for redemption. Perhaps this journey wasn't about escaping my past. It was about finding meaning beyond it. The weight of Dr. Gibson's secret gnawed at him like a relentless predator, stalking him in the quiet moments when he thought no one was watching. His diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, wasn't just a death sentence. It was an emotional landmine threatening to destroy what little remained of his fractured relationship with his daughter. He had spent years building walls around himself, burying emotions under layers of professional detachment, but now those walls were crumbling. Every time he picked up the phone to call her, his hand trembled and words failed him. "What do I even say?" he muttered aloud one evening, pacing his dimly lit office. The fear of rejection or worse, pity kept him paralyzed. Yet deep down, he knew she deserved the truth, however painful it might be. Meanwhile, tensions between characters reached a boiling point as unresolved grievances bubbled to the surface. Molly, once fiercely loyal to Dr. Five, found herself caught in the crossfire of bitterness and betrayal. When Dr. Gibson accused her of undermining hospital authority by defending Dr. Five, she snapped back without hesitation. "You're so obsessed with protecting this institution that you've forgotten why we're here. To save lives." Her voice echoed through the sterile corridors, drawing stares from passing staff members. For a moment, Gibson looked as though he'd been slapped, but instead of retaliating, he turned away, his shoulders sagging under the weight of guilt and exhaustion. It was clear that the man who once commanded respect now stood on shaky ground, both physically and emotionally. As for Dr. Five, fragments of his past began to emerge, painting a picture far more complex than anyone had imagined. During a private conversation with Molly, he confessed to a history marred by personal failures, a marriage torn apart by his former drinking habit, friendships lost to broken promises, and a career nearly derailed by poor choices. "I wasn't always the person you see now," he admitted, his voice thick with regret. "There were nights I didn't recognize myself." These revelations added depth to his character, making his redemption arc all the more poignant. They also raised questions about whether he could truly move forward or if his past would continue to haunt him. Amidst these mounting pressures, subtle hints about Dr. Gibson's mortality cast a somber shadow over the narrative. A sudden fainting spell in the hallway left him sprawled on the cold tile floor, gasping for air while Molly rushed to his side. "Dr. Gibson, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice laced with panic. Though he regained consciousness quickly, the incident served as a grim reminder of his fragile state. Later, alone in his office, he stared at the envelope containing his confession letter intended for his daughter. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered, How do I tell her that I might not have much time left? These interwoven subplots created a tapestry of raw emotion and unresolved conflicts, pushing the story toward its climax. Each character faced their own reckoning. Dr. Gibson grappling with his impending death and strained familial ties. Dr. Five confronting the ghosts of his past. And Molly torn between loyalty and disillusionment. Their journeys intertwined in ways neither predictable nor comfortable, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and each other. And yet, amidst the chaos, there were glimmers of hope, moments of vulnerability that hinted at the possibility of healing, forgiveness, and renewal. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.